increasing its displacement to a mind-boggling 2,000 cubic centimeters. Just one piston weighed over 3 kilograms.
To fit 8 pistons into an engine originally designed as Wetwing. High-performance turbo diesel, no vibrations thanks to a brilliant motorsport solution.
The bike was immediately nicknamed Mammoth at its presentation. All the way up to 4th gear, the motorcycle left black stripes on the asphalt.
And each of the 5 cylinders had its own carburetor and exhaust. What about a 2-liter single barrel? And yes, such a thing exists. And today we're going to take a look at the creation of the German constructor Fritz Langer, NSU Bison 2000, whose engine was made from a cylinder of an aviation engine. As of today, the NSU Bison 2000 holds the record for the biggest single-cylinder engine in the world. Earlier, a motorcycle NSU 1000 was built by a Langer, also a single-cylinder and also the holder of this record, but soon it was surpassed by another with a volume of 1.5 liters. And to conquer a new peak, Fritz starts building the Bison 2000. Langer took the NSU Consul 500 motorcycle as a base, completely reworking the frame and suspension to fit the new engine, but preserving the authenticity and retro style of a 50s motorcycle. Then he installed this incredibly monstrous aviation cylinder, increasing its displacement to a mind-boggling 2,000 cubic centimeters. Just one piston weighed over 3 kilograms, which made Fritz seek the craftsman from Mali, who reduced the weight of this part to 1.5 kilograms, specifically 1650 grams, with a diameter of 146 millimeters. Also, the carter had to be increased by 6 centimeters in width to match the cylinder diameter. However, the magnitude of this bike doesn't stop there, as the stainless steel exhaust pipe possesses a diameter of 75 millimeters and is without a muffler. In connection with this, the sound of this motorcycle was also mind-blowing, so just listen to this, you know. And now for the cherry on top. This beast starts up with the help of Kickstarter. And let's leave this aspect, I guess, on the conscience of our imagination. Today our collection of rarest and most amazing motorcycles has been enriched with yet another very strange but unique specimen.
Dieter Hartmann Wertwein is the name of a German motorcycle enthusiast who managed to fit 8 pistons into an engine originally designed as Wetwing. After the accident that completely changed his life, he not only did not give up, but also continued to create unique designs with extremely unconventional and witty aesthetics. This is the story of a one-of-a-kind motorcycle with a very romantic name, Ducati Eleanor. Rimbach, Odenwald. This is a municipality on the southern German wine route with a population of about 8,600 people. Dieter Hartmann Wertwein has been living here with his family for 38 years. His wife Petra rides the Marini, while his son Fabian rides a Yamaha R6. Dieter owns a Ducati 900 SS and a Bultaco Alpina 370 with one unique advantage. By the way, it was with this motorcycle that his design activity began. In the early 90s, he designed and manufactured a cylinder head for this motorcycle to transition from 2-stroke to 4-stroke. The homemade camshaft with roller tappets was driven by a chain. The design met all requirements, and in 1992, the German Technical Inspection Organization TV gave its approval. The test bench showed 15 horsepower at 3,700 revolutions per minute. Dieter was able to move freely and legally on his custom-modified motorcycle. Despite his concerns, the homemade head did not cause any problems. An engineer by education, Dieter worked at an automobile factory, dealing with the assembly line rather than engine design, as one might expect. On the morning of March 2, 2002, he was heading to work on his Ducati 900 SS. The route he took was as familiar to Dieter as the back of his hand. Every turn, angle, entry speed, every bump, and every pothole. He was also an experienced rider, thanks to his numerous motorcycle tours across Europe. But on that March morning, unfortunately, all of this proved to be useless. At a temperature of around 0 degrees Celsius, the front wheel slips and Dieter Hartmann Wertwain hits his back against the guardrail. This fall will radically change his entire life. From that moment on, Dieter will be permanently confined to a wheelchair. But it did not break his spirit. For years after the unfortunate incident, he finds the strength for a new project. Perhaps it is the true, sincere love for technology that drives such people, such enthusiasts. Their vision of the motorcycle as something more than just a means of transportation allows for such actions in difficult life situations. In 2006, Dieter Hartmann Wertwain began developing and installing a 4-valve cylinder head in the engine of the racing BMW R50, even before the DOHC Boxer HP2 Sport from BMW appeared. Everything turned out in the best possible way, but then the engineer was struck by another interesting idea. Dieter Hartmann Wertwain planned to create a compact 4-cylinder engine based on a single-cylinder design, using a single connecting rod. The system, as is the case with brilliant things, turned out to be simple and even thought-provoking. Why had no one thought of this before? The new project, named Monkey 125-4, yes, here Dieter was less original. So, Hartmann Worldwide based their design on the mini-bike Honda Z50 Monkey, or rather its Chinese copy, as stated in the sources. From its tiny 50 cubic centimeters single-cylinder 4-stroke engine with 2 horsepower, Dieter Hartmann Wertwain created a real inline 4. The project was launched in March 2007 when he disassembled the engine of a Chinese monkey bike for measurements. Dieter modeled it on the computer every day for 2 months. He manufactured most of the products himself, including the camshaft, cylinder blocks, rocker arms, and connecting rods. As for the valves and pistons, Dieter used original Honda parts here. Instead of one original piston with a diameter of 39 mm, there are now 4 25 mm pistons. The common camshaft 4, roughly speaking, for 2-valve heads is driven by a timing belt. But how did he manage to attach 4 pistons to a single connecting rod? His patent for this technology will guide us. It shows that 4 single cylinders are mounted on a supporting base, which is secured in place at the cylinder through which the original connecting rod passes. The V-shaped support is mounted on the original connecting rod, on which 2 central pistons are installed. 2 side pistons on the other side move through an auxiliary kinematic mechanism consisting of 4 short connecting rods and 2 rocker arms secured between the cylinders. There is an opinion that this way the reciprocating mass is reduced, its stroke is decreased, the crankshaft is simplified, and this should have a positive effect. The engine should gain RPM faster, and friction losses should be reduced. But there is an alternative opinion that suggests there is a possibility of significant lateral displacement due to the ultra-short connecting rods. Moreover, such an engine will only be efficient at speeds above 10,000 RPM. Therefore, it is not very efficient and lacks durability. About a year after the start of the project, the 4-cylinder engine was completed and started for the first time. Dieter did not find a suitable manifold with 4 carburetors that could be installed in the chassis, so the original carburetor, which fed all 4 cylinders, was retained. His son Fabian was holding a glass of gasoline, from which fuel was flowing through a hose into the carburetor. Dieter was very worried that his engine could fall apart due to material defects, incorrect calculations, or lack of lubrication. He was greatly surprised that the motor started on the first try. 2 days later, the 4-cylinder engine would come to life again in the frame of this little one. The parking lot across from the supermarket will be the site of the first test drive. Fabian made several laps while Dieter recorded it all on video and posted it online. The sound of this small 4-cylinder engine reminded me of the legendary Honda CB754. It is as loud as the response from the network. 6 weeks after the first video, dozens of requests for test drives started coming in. The small 4-cylinder engine hums and vibrates less than the original. It responds excellently to the throttle and shouts its thirst from the exhaust pipe. The output power is readable, but you need to be careful not to tip over on this little thing. At around 8,000 RPM, it is still increasing. However, 8,000 is reached in an instant. According to Dieter, the power was around 6 to 7 horsepower. But as Dieter himself says, the Monkey 125 was just a training motorcycle before the really big project. At the Intermode 2010 exhibition, Dieter presented his new motorcycle. It was the fateful Ducati 900 SS that Dieter rode to work and which had once changed his life. And as you have already correctly guessed, the power unit in it was not the standard V-twin, but a compact, 8-cylinder V-engine built on the principle of the Monkey 4. The total volume of all combustion chambers is now 868 cubic centimeters, as indicated by the label on the engine. The power reaches 80 horsepower at the exhibition. A 3D visualization of the mechanism you are currently observing on the screen was also presented along with the motorcycle. The goal of the project is for the V8 to operate like a 2-cylinder engine at lower speed ranges, without the inherent vibration, and to rev up like crazy. Dieter believes that if the V8 delivers the same performance but slightly earlier, then why should TV have anything against such an engine? In fact, at the time of the presentation, the engine couldn't even start. However, 9 years later, in September 2019, a video surfaced online showing the fully functioning Ducati Eleanor engine. In December of the same year, the following photos also appeared on official sources. This means that work on the Ducati Eleanor is ongoing. In addition, it is worth mentioning where Dieter Hartmann-Werthwein works on his motorcycles. He does this in the attic of his house, where his workshop is located. Lathes and milling machines, several hundred kilograms of spare parts, and a computer are situated on 50 square meters of flooring. Paintings by Marc Chauvel hang on the walls, and sunlight streams through the huge front windows. The color mood that can only be found in delivery rooms. To this comparison, Dieter responds with a smile, because my child was born here. I will definitely keep an eye on the work of this strong and incredibly talented person, and I really hope that the Ducati, already Eleanor, will change his life once again, but this time for the better.
This is the world's first two-wheeled serial turbo diesel. A high-performance turbo diesel, no vibrations thanks to a brilliant motorsport solution. Since its creation in the late 19th century, the diesel engine has found application in many industries. Whether it is maritime, locomotive or urban transport, in various auto transport or stationary use. This was made possible by its main advantages over the traditional internal combustion engine. 30% lower fuel consumption and a longer service life, often even with more compact sizes. It also appealed to almost all manufacturers of civilian cars. But thus far nobody has managed to merge diesel engines with motorcycle chassis on a mass production scale. The German company Neander planned to change this in the mid-2000s thanks to its innovative diesel engine. Engineer Rupert Beindel utilized actual racing technologies in his engine, which renders it genuinely groundbreaking. First of all, Beindel used the cylinder head layout patented by Austrian engineer Ludwig Apfelbeck, which was used in BMW racing engines in Formula 2 races in the 60s. With this arrangement, the valves were radially positioned. Secondly, Rupert connected each piston in the engine with 2 connecting rods and 2 crankshafts which rotate in opposite directions. A similar solution could be found in the previously developed by them petrol Suzuki Bimar Super Mona from the eponymous racing series of the 90s. Rupert's 750cc single produced an astonishing 115 horsepower according to Rupert himself, at an excessive 12,000 revolutions per minute for one cylinder. But why does a diesel cruiser need such complex racing technologies? Radially arranged valves in hemispherical combustion chambers produced a more efficient fuel mixture swirl and had superior heat exchange compared to the classical valve arrangement. During the Opfelbeck, each intake valve cools the adjacent exhaust valve. With 2 crankshafts, Bindle eliminated engine vibrations, and 2 connecting rods relieved the piston from lateral loads, thereby making the diesel unit even more durable. The turbo diesel twin with air oil cooling and 1430cc displacement produced 112 GP at 4200 and 240 nanometers at 2600 revolutions per minute. To achieve this, he is aided by the Garrett turbine, which generates 0.4 bars of pressure in a short-stroke diesel engine. Reducing lateral forces on the piston is vital, as the engine faces increased pressure from working gases, with a compression ratio of 16:1. The Bosch Common Rail direct injection fuel system is employed in the Neander engine, which is also equipped with a dry multi-disc clutch and a 6-speed gearbox. All of these components are installed within a frame made of chromoly steel material. In the early prototypes of the motorcycle, a single 43 mm inverted fork was used, but in the final version of the motorcycle there were already 2 in the form of a double telescopic fork, which is also quite unusual. Most likely one couldn't handle such weight, which was 270 kilograms in dry form. Decades later, a similar solution can be seen on the Yamaha Nikin GT. Behind is the Yolens monoshock absorber. Generally, everything is normal for that time. The only thing Motec devices hint at is the engine's potential. When you first get acquainted with a motorcycle, you will be pleasantly surprised by several features. First of all, this is a very low seat, only 650 mm in height. Secondly, after revival, the engine does not produce any vibrations at all. He is strangely immobile no matter how you twist him. The second crankshaft and extra connecting rods work. Up to 2000, the engine gains speed smoothly, enabling worry-free starts. Everything interesting begins after. The peak moment is reached already at 2500 and remains practically horizontal until the peak power. Bundle claims revving engine to 7000 revolutions per minute was a success. Deceptively dull engine sound has the potential to cause the vehicle to shake at idle speed. This is something you should never do on this motorbike. The engine is simply made for active driving purposes. He comes alive at Garrett's faint whistle, which nonetheless is clearly audible over the diesel roar. And perhaps the biggest surprise, after you get used to the idea of riding a diesel motorcycle, will be how lightning fast the engine actually revs up. A short power and torque range will make you work quite well with your left foot, clicking the 6-speed gearbox from a Lita Superbike. The max speed of the motorcycle exceeds 240 km per h, surpassing classmates of his time with their 180 km per h. And this was expected, as the motorcycle was created in Germany, a country of endless autobahns with no speed limits. Add to this simply negligible fuel consumption with such characteristics. 0 vibrations and you will get simply the perfect motorcycle for long trips. Maybe for someone the motorcycle sound will be a downside, but objectively considering the advantages and exclusivity this diesel offers, it's a small price to pay. Moreover, due to its unique features, the engine's size and weight are not considered disadvantages. Thanks to them, Neander seems like a real brutal cruiser for big uncles. The cylinder block looks really big and powerful, which it actually is. Generally, it appears to be amazing. Just take a look at this monstrous fuel tank with its cool, stylish and impressive air intakes. The only and unfortunately devastating minus turned out to be the price of the product. $85,000. If it cost half of this amount, it would already be possible to consider full-scale serial production. Most likely, such a complex and technologically advanced diesel turned out to be too expensive to develop. A total of 250 motorcycles of this type were announced for release. The actual numbers are unknown. Neander 1400 is a big surprise, not only because of its unique technical solutions, but also because of how effectively it applied the advantages of diesel development in a motorcycle. He inspired hope in many during that time, expecting a real turbo diesel era in the motorcycle industry to begin soon.
These days, you'd be hard-pressed to surprise anyone with a big motorcycle engine. But in the 1960s, people had a somewhat different idea about motorcycles. And half a century ago, one German motorcycle enthusiast would forever change the perception of a powerful and fast bike by building a motorcycle with a car engine, which people would later call the first hyperbike. Meet Friedel Munch and his motorcycle, the Munch Mammoth. Friedel Munch was born on January 6, 1927, in the town of Dornassenheim. Even as a young man, Friedel took an interest in two-wheeled machines. Right after finishing school, he trained as an auto mechanic. Then, at the age of 17, he was drafted into the army, where he successfully served as a mechanic. After the war, Munch started a small workshop in his basement, where he mainly repaired motorcycles. Friedel would take on all sorts of different models and repair them, which essentially laid the foundation for his future. In his well-equipped workshop, he could fix absolutely anything that came his way. The only thing was, the difficulty of getting new parts forced the young mechanic to improvise. At the same time, Friedel's father was managing the Horex dealership in Friedberg. Later, Munch Jr. got into racing and pursued further education. At the same time, he managed to prepare his own hand-tuned 500cc Horex S5 for the first race of his life. And in the spring of '48, he entered a race at the Hockenheim Ring, where during the practice runs, he hit an average speed of 147 kilometers per hour, which stunned absolutely everyone. But in the race itself, Friedel's luck ran out. After just a few laps, his motorcycle failed him. The engine simply seized from overheating. But Munch didn't give up. He refined the design, implementing a dry sump lubrication system, and named the new engine Pifficus, which in German means tricky thing. But his competitors weren't sitting idle, and now Friedel's motorcycle needed more power. The old single-cylinder engine was no longer enough for Munch, so he developed a new cylinder head with dual camshafts for a new 500cc twin-cylinder engine. Since this machine had little in common with the original Horex engine, he named it the Munch Special. But later, after a crash, Friedel quit racing and dedicated himself entirely to developing and building motorcycles. Nevertheless, thanks to racing, people came to know the talented designer. In 1955, there was a short break, after which Friedel got a position at the Horex company in the race testing department. But he quit the job after just 6 months. A year later, the company stopped producing motorcycles, and Munch bought up all the production equipment. By 1964, Friedel had developed an effective drum brake and was successfully selling it to racing teams. The huge 12-inch drum, made of a magnesium alloy, would instantly stop whatever it was mounted on with just the slightest touch of the hand. Here, by the way, is an example of Munch's design on a Norton motorcycle. By 1966, the first prototype of his most famous motorcycle was ready, the Munch Mammut TTS. At the very beginning of the project, Friedel planned to build a 4-cylinder engine based on a pair of 2-cylinder Horex Imperator engines. The idea for this engine had come to him back when he was in the Horex racing department. But in practice, after facing difficulties during the build and realizing that racing engines were unlikely to suit a road motorcycle, Munch abandoned the Horex idea and began looking for a more practical solution. The main criteria for this new engine were power, reliability, and serviceability. And who would have thought, but Friedel found such an engine in a small German car, the NSU Prinz 1000. Its engine, by the way, had only 55 horsepower with a 1-liter displacement, but by putting it into a motorcycle frame, Munch created a true hyperbike of its time, the ultimate road motorcycle. It was packed with electronics, and on top of that, very fast. Its top speed reached 225 kilometers per hour. In the 60s, it was basically a street-legal rocket. Thanks to its brutal appearance, the bike was immediately nicknamed Mammoth at its presentation. Overall, the motorcycle was very technologically advanced, but far from standard. For example, you needed 2 keys to start it. First, the right key controlled the separate high and low beams, the parking lights, and the turn signals. Then the left key was used to actually start the motorcycle with the starter. And remember, this was in the 1960s. The motorcycle had so much torque that no existing wheel could handle the load. So Friedel designed a uniquely shaped rear wheel from an aluminum alloy, which later became the motorcycle's signature feature. By the way, this was the first production motorcycle with alloy wheels, as well as the first 4-cylinder motorcycle to be released long before the mainstream Japanese models. The drivechain was well lubricated and enclosed in a sealed housing, which protected it from dirt and water, thereby simplifying the motorcycle's maintenance. To save weight, the frame, contrary to the conventions of the time, was made not from steel but from that same magnesium alloy. All in all, the motorcycle was very high quality and reliable. It not only looked, but also felt truly German. After all, it was. This machine didn't come cheap. In the 1960s, its price was $4,000, while a Harley-Davidson, for example, cost around $1,500. The motorcycle was practically perfect, with the only exceptions being its large size and weight. But on the other hand, the bike held the road perfectly. The long wheelbase, combined with its substantial weight, had a positive effect on the motorcycle's stability. Plus, the bike had rear shocks from Koni and a front fork from either the British Rickman or the Italian Siriani. Ultimately, the 1967 version of the Munch Mammut TTS motorcycle had an engine with an increased displacement of 1200 cc and a power output of 88 horsepower. And later, with a refined fuel injection system, this version produced a full 100 horsepower. For those who really like to push the limits, there were 1300 cc versions and even a 1400 cc turbocharged version with a claimed output of 143 horsepower. Despite the success and greatness of his motorcycles, Friedel Munch was never able to establish serious mass production. He was a brilliant engineer, but not a very good businessman. Financial difficulties were a constant companion for Munch, which led to his bankruptcy in 1971. Friedel was forced to sell all the rights to his company. Later, he would return with a new project, a 2-liter monster with 260 horsepower. But that's a topic for another episode, and if this video gets a lot of likes, we'll make an episode about that too. Friedel Munch died in April of 2014, having created more than 500 examples of his motorcycle in various versions throughout his life. .260 horsepower, which is above the current level of a MotoGP prototype. Torque is 300 Newton meters, at least twice that of any production power cruiser today. All this was available 15 years ago in one production motorcycle. This is the second coming of the ambitious German designer Friedel Munch. This is a Munch Mammut 2000.
Ich träume und die Welt erzittert.
After the company's bankruptcy in 1971, Friedel repeatedly attempted to restore production, resulting in the introduction of new motorcycle models. Between 1973 and 1977, Munch produced the Horax 1400 motorcycle. Then in 1984, the Titan 1600 was released, and already in 1989, after the construction of the Titan 2000, Munch finally decided to move away from motorcycle production forever. Most likely, this is what would have happened if not for one person.
named Thomas Petch. Thomas was an ardent fan of Munch's works. Following the fate of Friedel and his company, which experienced both ups and downs, after its bankruptcy, the idea of reviving the brand was ignited. In his head, an image of a modern motorcycle is being created with all the features of brutality and monumentality of the classic Mammoth. In the summer of 1977, Thomas boards a return flight where a nice gentleman sits next to him. In a heartfelt conversation with him, Petch brings up the topic of Munch's motorcycles, to which he hears that Friedel Munch is the man's neighbor. And Thomas, without hesitation, asked him about the possibility of meeting Friedel. A little later, Thomas receives a call from Friedel Munch, who would like to meet him. The result of that fateful meeting would be Munch Mammut 2000. Even today, 15 years later, the second Mammoth Munch simply amazes with his characteristics. The 1998cc turbocharged inline-4 engine, based on a Cosworth 16-valve cylinder head, produces a whopping 260 horsepower and 295 newton-meters of torque, with peak output reached at just 3,000 RPM. For comparison, the most powerful production sport bike, or rather hyperbike, Kawasaki H2R has 326 horsepower and 165 newton-meters of torque. The Triumph Rocket 3 is considered one of the most powerful power cruisers available today, with 146 horsepower and 221 newton-meters of torque. Needless to say, in the early 2000s, this monster could easily deal with giants like Hayabusa. Forget production motorcycles. At that time, even MotoGP prototypes had less power. It wasn't until the arrival of the Aprilia RS Cube in 2002 with its pneumatic valve train that they reached the level of 240 to 260 horsepower. The engine itself ran very smoothly, with a velvety feel. It started pulling from just 1,000 RPM, and the peak was reached at just over 5,000, which is completely atypical for a motorcycle. But the originality of its design didn't end with the engine. The motorcycle's dry weight was a monstrous 354 kilograms. And that's despite the fact that the bike used magnesium alloys and carbon fiber parts. Due to this weight, for better handling and power delivery, a pair of shocks from White Power were installed in the lower part of the motorcycle, right behind the oil pan. The massive swing arm and huge exhaust simply left no other room. This was another of the many exceptional technical solutions on this unique motorcycle. The front suspension consisted of a 43mm inverted Öhlins fork. All that power was stopped by a pair of 320mm brake discs, coupled with two, get this, 8-piston calipers up front and a 280mm brake disc with a 2-piston caliper in the rear. Thomas Petch, who took on the responsibility of producing the new Mammut, inspired by the idea of reviving the Munch brand, created a truly exclusive, incredibly powerful monster that not everyone could tame. Journalists who were lucky enough to test ride this motorcycle had the following to say about it. The engine of this motorcycle is something unimaginable. Even at 3,000 RPM, the power output's comparable to a meteorite. The performance chart must look like a skyscraper. I was advised to go full throttle. You could probably twist the throttle all the way if you took some sedatives, studied the bike well, and did it somewhere with a lot of space, preferably in a straight line. Because in the corners, this thing's very unpredictable. In those years, there was no such thing as traction control. At one point, I thought the clutch was slipping, but it was the 200mm rear tire. All the way up to 4th gear, the motorcycle left black stripes on the asphalt. And this was all with the engine detuned from 300 horsepower to 260 and limited to a top speed at 250 kilometers per hour. as Petch figured that would be more than enough, and in principle he wasn't on. But as time would tell, the second Mammut met the same fate as the first. Despite the excitement for the bike and Thomas's enthusiasm, production proved to be too unprofitable. The frame, wheels, swing arm, clutch, and gearbox were all designed and built around this turbo monster from Cosworth, which of course cost a fortune. This ultimately led to a price tag of €86,000 in 2002. Later, Petch would even have to sell several units at double the price. Finally, in April 2002, the entrepreneur from Würzburg pulled the emergency brake and stopped production. In total, 15 units were built, 8 of which were sold. The remaining 7 stayed with Thomas Petch. But despite the setbacks, the motorcycles of the Great Munch deserve our attention just as much as the other rare and exotic bikes on our channel.
The standard concept of a motorcycle, where the engine is rigidly mounted in the frame, has unquestionably existed from the very roots of Harley and Indian to our present day. But in the early 1920s, when there were no clear rules for what a proper motorcycle should be, a unique machine was created with a 5-cylinder aviation radial engine located in the front wheel. Any rally car driver will confirm that when it comes to questionable road surfaces, front-wheel drive, in this case compared to rear-wheel drive, is unmatched. Based on this, a reasonable question arises: why not make a motorcycle with front-wheel drive? A group of 3 German engineers, Hans Meixner, Fritz Cockerell, and Otto Landgraf, founded the company Megola in 1921, which got its name by taking the first 2 letters from each of the founders' last names. The company was founded in Munich with the aim of building a motorcycle based on a 3-cylinder radial engine located in the rear wheel. And as the plans for commercializing this enterprise grew, Cockerell replaced the 3-cylinder engine with a 5-cylinder one and proposed a new concept with the engine now located in the front. However, this was not the first attempt at a front-wheel drive motorcycle, as the British firm Radco released an unsuccessful prototype in 1919. Megola was merely the first production motorcycle with front-wheel drive. Of course, such an idea had many complicating factors, and one of the main ones was making the engine transmit power to the drive wheel while simultaneously controlling it. But Fritz Cockerell didn't even think that he wouldn't be able to overcome all these nuances with smart solutions. And now, more details about the motorcycle and its design. So, thanks to the placement of the power unit in the front wheel, the engineers conveniently bypassed the problem of transmitting power to the steering wheel. But the spokes are mounted directly into the crankcase, so there is no gearbox. This is a single-speed machine. There is also no clutch, which makes riding the Megola particularly challenging, but more on that later. Many incorrectly refer to the Megola engine as radial, but in fact it is technically a rotary engine. The cylinders of a radial engine remain static and the crankshaft rotates along with the propeller in the case of aviation. Here everything is the opposite. The cylinders rotate together with the wheel. The solution to what initially seemed like a complex problem turned out to be relatively simple, if of course one can use that word to describe this motorcycle. A planetary gear was added to the regular aviation engine, which actually provided the power transmission to the wheel. At the same time, the crankshaft rotates in the opposite direction of the wheel to balance the mechanism. But this was just the first problem that the German craftsmen faced. Just think about how to supply such an engine with fuel and lubrication, not to mention the exhaust system or the spark delivery. Cockerell's solutions are both inventive and elegant. Lubrication is supplied to the crankcase from a 4-liter tank mounted on the left side of the front fork by gravity. Next, the oil pump, driven through bevel gears from the magneto, which in turn is attached to the planetary gear and generates the spark, provides lubrication. On the right side of the fork, there is a fuel tank similarly positioned, which operates on the same principle as the oil tank and ensures a regular supply of fuel. The main tank is located inside the steel monocoque frame. Also, thanks to the engine placement, cooling was not an issue, and each of the 5 cylinders had its own carburetor and exhaust. So, what do we have in the end? We have a one-of-a-kind 5-cylinder side-valve radial engine with a host of unique and interesting solutions, a displacement of 637 cubic centimeters, and a power output of 14 horsepower, or 25 in the sports version, which by the standards of the 1920s was truly impressive. Megola produced 2 models, the touring version with a steel frame, full spring front and rear suspension, and an atypical but very comfortable bucket-shaped seat, and the dry sport version with a high-performance 25 horsepower engine, and believe it or not, the Megola Sport was a semi-successful racing machine. Without a clutch, gearbox and front brake. At the rear, by the way, there was a regular drum brake. It wasn't particularly useful for road surfaces, but it was perfect for oval dirt tracks. At that time, Megola was working with racer Toni Bauhofer, who even defeated the BMW factory team and won the national championship in 1924. All of this is wonderful, of course, but using this motorcycle on public roads turned into agony. The motorcycle could only be started by rotating the front wheel. This could be done by placing the front wheel on a stand and spinning the front wheel with your boot, or simply by push-starting it, but there's an unpleasant aspect here as well. Remember, there's no clutch, so you need to jump onto the motorcycle immediately to prevent it from taking off without you. At the same time, you need to precisely control the throttle, as the motorcycle accelerates equally easily from the lowest to the highest RPMs. There is only one gear. You also need to keep an eye on the position of the front wheel to ensure it is always straight, otherwise you risk losing your shoulder joints and control of the motorcycle, as all the torque will be transferred to your hands, and the motorcycle will inevitably try to topple you over. For the same reason, when you open the throttle, you almost completely lose the ability to go anywhere except straight. One journalist put it this way: "You won't truly understand the real meaning of the word understeer until you ride a Megola." In the end, only one question remains. Why was it necessary to build such a strange machine? A motorcycle with such complex solutions, which had not been seen before, to the extent that the final product barely exists as a motorcycle. The only justification is that Gockerel, like many other creative inventors of that time, occasionally stepped outside the bounds of conventional norms. Production of the Megola ceased in 1926 with about 2,000 units made. Since then, there has been no other mass-produced front-wheel drive motorcycle,